nice to see you. Nice to see you. She changes everything she touches, and everything she touches changes. Now, I'd like it if you would sing that with me, and you'll find it goes throughout this song. And when you hear that, if you sing it, that'll be wonderful. And when we change over, if you sing it, that'll be even better. Thank you. She changes everything she touches, and everything she touches changes. She changes everything she touches, and everything she touches changes. She is a woman who weaves in the sky. We'll watch her weave, watch her fingers fly. She is beside us, beginning to end. She's our grandmother, our sister, our friend. She changes everything she touches, and everything she touches changes. She changes everything she touches, and everything she touches changes. She is the needle and we are the thread. She is the weaver and we are the web. She changes everything she touches, and everything she touches changes. I was in a right guddle. Now that's a Scottish word. A right guddle. And I'd been in a right guddle for ages. My head felt woolly, my body wasn't firing on all four cylinders, and my house was a mess. And I'd been feeling that for a long time. But one day I woke up to sunshine, and I thought, it's a beautiful day. And I felt so much better. It was amazing at how much energy I had. I thought, right, I'm going to go into the garden with my coffee, a notepad and a pen, and I'm going to make a list. I'm going to make a list of things I have to do, I would really like to do, and things that could be, they could wait. I was going to try and get my life back in balance. I took my coffee out there and it was just so beautiful. I mean, there was a rosy glow in the sky just as the sun was rising, and a soft, warm breeze. And I thought, oh, this is just wonderful. My garden is my happy place. And I thought about it and I thought, well, what I'd like to do, because I haven't been outside for quite a while, I'd like to walk around the garden and take in the beauty of it. So I put my coffee and all my other bits on the table, and I decided I would go and have a look at all the shoots and the buds and the flowers and everything that had come out. Now, it won't take very long. I knew it wouldn't take very long, so I could get back to my list. I have a sort of small, uneven lawn surrounded by shrubs and flowers. And there are some shrubs which I've put in the ground as holding places while I think about where they would go. They're still there. So I never moved them. But as I began to walk around the garden, I came across a spider's web glistening in the morning sun. And as I listened, there was a soft chant that was coming to me from the east. And this chant was, with beauty before me it is woven, with beauty behind me it is woven, with beauty above me it is woven, with beauty below me it is woven, and in beauty it is finished. And when I looked up, there was a spider mending its morning web. And, without conscious thought, that in my world, spiders do not speak. And I said, Grandmother Spider, Your web is beautiful. Welcome to my garden. You have brought this beauty to me, and you have brought a smile to my morning. And I was a bit surprised because Grandmother Spider replied, "What is your name, child?" "Oh, I'm sorry, my name's Anne." She said, "I am pleased to bring a smile to your morning, Anne, because I can see that your life is not in balance. Your spirit is troubled. You should always try to keep your life in balance. Pay attention to your stories and your songs. Pay attention to your beliefs and to your family and friends." It was just as though she'd read my mind, because I had been concentrating on storytelling and I hadn't felt very well. And so all that was going on in my life had sort of, I just wanted to opt out. And she said to me, she said, "Sit down, listen with your heart." And I was curious as to what she wanted to say, because, as I said, spiders don't normally speak in my world. So I was curious. I sat down and I listened. And she said, "It is important to keep a balance in your life. It is important to pay attention to all these things. And if you do, then your spirit will be happy and you can be happy in your life." I want to tell you that spiders are keepers of stories, Anne. And I have lots of spider stories that I could tell you. I could tell you about an arachne from Greece. I could tell you about the Caribbean stories of Anansi. But have you heard the Navajo stories about Spider Woman? Oh, yes. My grandchildren took me to a superhero film, and Spider-Man was one of the heroes. The superhero. Is Spider-Woman his wife? Well, when I looked at the web, it was going. Grandmother Spider was laughing at me. She said, "No, Anne. Spider-Woman is part of the Navajo culture. They tell stories about Spider-Woman to show their beliefs and their culture. There are lots of stories about Spider-Woman. In the beginning of their world, the Holy Spirit beings gave Spider-Woman, they talked to her and they said, "You have a gift. You have the gift of weaving." But they didn't tell her how to weave or what to weave. They let that up to her natural curiosity. One day she was out foraging for food and exploring when she came across this small sapling that she'd never seen before. And she stretched her hand out to touch it. And to her astonishment, a thread out from the center of her hand and attached it to any leaf that she touched. And when she saw these threads, she thought, "I wonder if I could maneuver these threads around. Could I manipulate them?" And when she had made an interesting design. And she was so taken with this that she wanted to practice. And she practiced all afternoon until she had created the most intricate design. Well, of course, she was excited. She went home to tell her husband. And when he saw it, he decided that he should make her a loom so that she could weave in a vertical fashion. He attached warp threads, top and bottom, and tensioned them so that she could weave horizontal threads or weft threads in and out and then tamp them down to make a material. And that was how Spider-Woman came to be a weaver. Now, she hadn't been weaving very long when a flood threatened their world. But luckily, because she could spin a web, she was able to escape into the world above. And she took along with her all the animals that had been created and the Holy Spirit beings. And they emerged into a new world in which we live today. Now, at that time, new people were being created, and the Navajo people, they were created in this world, and they called it the glittering world, because that was where they were created. And they had to learn all the things that you have to learn when you're in a new world: how to build a house, what was good to eat, what to put in your garden, and also how to make things work to keep their life in balance. And Spider-Woman, she was instrumental in teaching them how to use their sheep, not only to eat, but also to weave. And so they learnt to shear the sheep, card the wool to get rid of the tangles, and also to weave that wool, stretch it out into thread. And it was one of the things that she taught them, and one that I want to tell you about, Anne, because if I tell you a story about weaving, you will see how important it is to keep your life in balance. So I'm going to tell you Spider-Woman's story. Listen with your heart, Anne. Listen with your ears. Now, Spider-Woman had been weaving for quite a long time, and she had been teaching the Navajo how to weave. Well, one day, a young weaver came to ask for help. Show me how to weave the traditions into my weaving. She was a little bit willful, a little bit strong-headed. And Spider-Woman suggested that she, after showing her how to make the tension in the loom, suggested that she just weave with the brown and the white wools, black, and not to weave too long, because she had to keep her life in balance, and she had to pay attention to her songs and her stories and her family. At first, it was an easy promise to keep because it was winter. She wove for a few hours and she was content. But as spring and the days lengthened, the new colours began to spring forth from the earth, and it excited the woman. She wanted to go out and she wanted to show the world what this creation was about. All the beautiful colours, she wanted to add them to her weaving. So she began to get up early in the morning and go out hunting for plants and roots that would make different colours, like lichen. I always get muddled up with this because you all say it something differently from me. Lichen, rock rose, and various other plant materials. And then she learnt how to get natural mordants that would fix those colours and stop them from running. She was excited. She was going to weave the creation of the world. So she quite forgot about her promise to Spider-Woman, and she began to weave from morning to night. And sometimes she wove all through the night when the moon was full. Her husband and her friends said, "You promised Spider-Woman that you would only weave for a short time and that you'll keep your life in balance." She didn't listen because she was so excited. She only had a few more lengths to go before the weaving was finished. And so she kept on weaving. She ignored everything else. And then one day, her husband came home. The weaving was finished in all its glory on the loom, but the woman was lying on the ground, still breathing, but unable to speak and unable to speak. And when he couldn't rouse her, he lifted her up and took them into their hogan, lay her on a mat and called for the hand trembler to diagnose the problem. And the hand trembler said, "It's the weaving sickness." And he called for the medicine man to do a blessing way ceremony to get rid of this sickness for the woman. Now, in a blessing way ceremony, no one is allowed to leave or enter the house while the prayers and the chants and the songs are said. And this went on all through the night until suddenly the medicine man stopped talking and he appeared to be listening. And then he said, "This woman's rug, this woman's weaving is so perfect that she's woven her spirit into the rug. And the only way she can escape is if she personally asked Spider Woman to set her free." On the rug, the woman's mouth began to move, but her voice came from the weaving on the loom. Spider Woman, please, please make my rug less perfect." And at that, Spider Woman rose from the center of the rug and gradually began to tease a bit of thread and tease it out until it ran all the way to the edge of that rug. A pathway that was barely discernible to the human eye. The woman's spirit ran as fast as it could down that pathway, back into her body. She opened her eyes, she sat up, and she could speak. And that night, she promised to show other weavers how to make that pathway so that they could be free. Free to make another rug. Free to weave the traditions of the prayers and the songs of the Navajo people so that this message would be passed on from generation to generation. There was a long silence. And then Grandmother Spider said to me, "This story is finished, Anne. I have others if you have need, but please come and visit me in the garden, but this story is finished." And then there was another long silence where peace sort of came to me and I came back to my garden. And there on all the bushes, they seemed like 1,000 spiders' webs glistening in the sun. And that soft chant came to me on the morning breeze. With beauty before me it is woven, with beauty behind me it is woven, with beauty above me it is woven, with beauty below me it is woven, and in beauty it is finished. Thank you. And now I would like to invite my friend Pam Mabin to come up and join us, and perhaps you join us in the chorus as we.
Hello.
Everything she touches and everything she touches changes.
Hello.
Everything she touches, everything she touches changes.
Hello.
Touches and everything she touches changes. She changes everything she touches and
Stop.
everything she touches changes.
I am Penelope. My name was not chosen before my birth. My father, the king of Sparta, so desperately wanted a son that when I was born, he was so disappointed and angry, he picked me up and he threw me out into the sea. My mother, a water nymph, so much more at home in water than on land, did nothing to help me. Now, I would have had a very short life if it had not been for the flock of ducks that swooped down and gently guided me back to the shore. Perhaps my father thought this was an omen. Anyway, he took me back and he named me Duck, Penelope in our language. And growing up with this story, I learned at a very early age that I could not depend on others. I was going to have to look out for myself in this life. Now, another thing I learned while growing up was to wait, and much of that had to do with my cousin Helen. Now, Helen was very beautiful, not nice or kind, but she was very beautiful, and as she grew older, she became even more beautiful, until suddenly everyone was talking about her as the most beautiful woman in the world. Well, this immediately set up a competition among the Greek kings about which of them would win her or his queen. And Helen knew how to look out for herself. And Helen was in this for riches and power. And she played those kings up against each one against another for a very, very long time. And meanwhile, all the rest of us Greek princesses just had to sit around and wait until she made her choice. Now, while all of this was going on, and it was taking a long time, some of these Greek kings, they were beginning to realize that there were too many others who were richer and more powerful than they were, and so they began to pack up and go back to their own thrones. And one of these kings was Odysseus. His kingdom was the rocky island of Ithaca. He was handsome and smart. Some even called him wily Odysseus. And he knew he was not going to win this competition. But he had watched what was going on long enough to know that there was so much bitter feeling and competition among all these kings that he could just not see it ending peacefully with Helen's choice. So somehow, it really was quite a feat. He managed to convince all these kings to agree to peacefully accept whoever Helen chose, and if ever she was taken from her chosen husband, they would come to his defense. Well, then, Odysseus returned to his home in Ithaca. Now, in those days, marriages were arranged, and our fathers seemed to feel that it would be mutually beneficial for our two kingdoms if the two of us were wed. So after our wedding, we packed up our wedding gifts and I sailed with my husband back to his kingdom of Ithaca. Now, Sparta, my homeland. Sparta was large, rich, powerful. Ithaca was small and bare and rocky. And the palace to which I went, well, it was much smaller and less luxurious than the one I had grown up in. But Odysseus and I became friends as well as lovers, and he enjoyed telling me stories. And as time went on, we became more and more close to each other, but still, it was a place where I was lonely until our son Telemachus was born. That first year of Telemachus's life, it was marvelous. We were so happy until suddenly word came to us that Helen had abandoned her husband, Menelaus, and had run away with the prince from Troy, who was visiting at their court. Now, Menelaus had immediately sent emissaries to bring him home. bring her home, but they returned empty-handed. And then every single one of those Greek kings who had sworn to defend Menelaus if ever Helen was taken from him, they had to gather up their men, fighting men, and leave their countries and sail to Troy. Now, Odysseus tried to get out of this. Even though he was the one who had thought of it in the first place, he even feigned madness, but he was found out. And so he too had to take the men from Ithaca and sail to Troy. The next 10 years seemed like an eternity. Very occasionally there'd be news from the war, but mostly there was nothing. Seasons passed, Telemachus grew, and then finally, word came from across the sea, that wooden horse strategy that Odysseus devised. It enabled the Greeks to finally beat the Trojans. The war was over, and the Greek kings gathered up their soldiers and their sailors and their spoils of war, and they all sailed for home. And then, nothing. Absolutely nothing. Oh, occasionally I'd hear news from about some other king that had returned to his home, but of Odysseus, there were only rumors about him fighting a cyclops or his men being turned into pigs by an enchantress. Telemachus was becoming a young man, and all this time I had tried to govern Ithaca responsibly, so that my husband would return to a reasonable amount of wealth and resources. I had not in any way been prepared to do this. It was a constant challenge. I tried to keep Odysseus alive for Telemachus by telling him stories of the father that had left so long ago. But as time continued to pass, I began to wonder myself, could Odysseus still be alive somewhere? I simply didn't know. But as more time passed, other men, much younger men, began to arrive at the palace. Now these men, they assumed Odysseus was dead, and they all wanted to marry me, and therefore become the man who governed Ithaca. Well, I was able to put them off for a while by telling them that, well, there were still a few rumors of Odysseus here and there, and anyway, an oracle had predicted he would return. Finally, things got really difficult, and more and more of these aggressive, insulting, rude younger men were practically living at my palace. They were calling themselves my guests, and they consumed an incredible amount of food and drink on a daily basis, and there was no one to challenge them. Telemachus was too young, and now on Greece, on Ithaca, there were only these young men and much older men, for a whole generation of our men had gone to war with Odysseus. Finally, as they continued to press me, I thought of a plan. Now, Odysseus' father had moved sometime from the palace and was living on the island, and I told these suitors that I had received news that he was in declining health, and I could not even pay any attention to their requests until I had woven a fine shroud for my father-in-law. And so I got out my loom and I set it up, and every day I wove very publicly for several hours on this shroud. The shroud never seemed to grow much longer, though, because every night I very carefully pulled out much of what I had woven during the day. Now, I was able to make this ruse last 3 long years, and then suddenly, I was found. I really don't know. I don't know how it happened, but I suspect that it was one of the maids from the palace. A lot of them were sleeping with the suitors, and I figured they had given me away. It had been it had been more than 20 years since my strong, handsome husband had sailed away. I was exhausted and out of excuses when a slovenly, grizzled old beggar arrived at the palace one day. These suitors at once began to harass him, but I offered him food after all. But he had as much right to my hospitality as they did. But as they continued to abuse him, something inside me just snapped. I could not go on living like this any longer. Now, I thought from time to time of ways of ending this with the suitors, but I knew I couldn't just choose one of them. That would only make him the target of all the others, and I knew that bloodshed would ensue. No, it would have to be a contest with a clear winner. And then I remembered Odysseus's bow. Odysseus was the only man in the kingdom who had ever been strong enough to bend that bow and string it. And then it was his habit to have 12 axes set up. Now, these are double-bladed axes with a handle and a ring on the top, so that all the rings were lined up, and then he would pick up the bow and the arrow and aim and send that arrow straight through all 12 of those rings. I looked out at the suitors and thought, you want to take Odysseus's place? You must do what he could do, and I announced the contest. Now, I had intended for it to be the following day, but they were so argumentative and eager and hostile, and I finally just said, it has to be now. And I sent Telemachus to bring his father's bow, bowstring, arrows, and of course the 12 axes. Now, this had been such a legendary feat for Odysseus, and Telemachus had heard about it so many times that he knew exactly how to set up those axes. And while he was busy setting them up, the suitors were shoving and pushing and jostling, and I could see they were struggling to see who would be first in line. And I raised my hand and I said, stop. Anyone who wishes shall have a chance. Telemachus was finished. First suitor who had shoved his way to the front of the line swaggered up, picked up the bow, and I saw the expression on his face change. He had not realized how heavy the bow was, and he tried to bend it, and he tried to bend it, and he tried to bend it, and finally he threw it down in disgust and stormed off. And the second suitor, somewhat less enthusiastically, came up, and he picked up the bow and tried to bend it far enough to string it. But he failed too, and so did the third and the fourth and the fifth, and on until every single one of these suitors had tried and failed, even to string the bow. Then they began clamoring immediately for another contest. But as I turned my head, I saw out of the corner of my eye the beggar standing in the doorway. And he asked, may I have a chance? Well, the suitors were up in arms. I raised my hand. Everyone had said, everyone who wishes. And as that beggar began to move forward, his movement changed to that of a much younger man. He picked up that bow, bent and strung it in a single movement, took the arrow, aimed and shot it straight through those 12 rings in the tops of the axes. For a moment, it was absolute silence. And then pandemonium broke out. Telemachus grabbed me and dragged me out of the great hall and locked me far away in the palace in a safe place. I was stunned. Odysseus had been the only man who had ever been able to string that bow. Could the beggar possibly be Odysseus returned? I didn't quite know what to think. And as I was sitting in this prison, I could hear sounds almost like a war. Weapons clanging and banging, men shrieking in pain and in anger. And it went on, but gradually over time, it became less and less until there was absolute silence. Still, I waited for a long time before Telemachus came to release me. And when he did, he told me all of the suitors were dead. And yes, the beggar had indeed been Odysseus returned. He had landed on the far side of the island, made contact with his son, and they had found several of his old servants whom he trusted. He and the servants had been kind of hanging around the palace, trying to think of a way to deal with these suitors. And my contest had given him exactly the opportunity he needed. The horror of the suitors was over. I had waited, anticipated Odysseus' return, but I did not know what that return could be like. We had been separated for more than 20 years. Each of us had lived challenging lives in our own ways, especially Odysseus, who had seen and participated in so many horrors. I knew we could not just go back to our lives as they had been before the war. I found myself feeling unsafe around Odysseus. Oh, he never struck me, but his anger was so volatile. His temper tantrums so explosive and often, and they seemed to have nothing to do with what was actually going on before him, but rather that he was living perhaps the horrors of the war and his long, difficult voyage home. He was fighting with his demons, and I was trying to protect myself with the demons that were haunting him, and for us, there seemed to be no way forward. One day, as ship arrived in port, and a handsome young man stepped out. He asked to meet Odysseus. He carried no weapons, but a spear his mother had sent him with for protection on his journey. But when Odysseus arrived and saw that spear, it angered him, and he reached for it, cutting himself on it. Within minutes, he had collapsed to the ground and died. The young man threw down the spear in horror. As I arrived, he looked at me with great sadness and introduced himself as Telegonus. He said his mother Circe had told him that Odysseus was his father, for Odysseus had spent time on her island of Aiaia on his way home from Troy. He had no intention of injuring his father in any way. He just wanted to meet his father. He had not known the spear his mother sent with him had been poisoned. I invited Telegonus into the palace to meet his brother, Telemachus, and that night, the three of us sat for a long time talking about how our lives had been more greatly influenced by chance and fate than by choice. As the evening drew to a close, Telegonus invited me to return to Aiaia with him the following day. I didn't sleep much that night. I knew the Odysseus I had loved and married had not ever really returned. Only a shell of the man he had been had come back. I, too, I had changed greatly in my 20 years of being responsible for the kingdom. And it was time for Telemachus to build a life for himself. There was nothing left for me on Ithaca. So in the morning, I accepted Telegonus's offer. They tell me that Circe has a wonderful loom made for her by Daedalus, the craftsman of the gods. And I wonder if she might let me use that loom to weave a new story for myself. I am Penelope. Now, please welcome Rebecca Hahn. She changes everything she touches, and
Everything she touches changes. She changes everything she touches, and everything she touches changes. She changes everything she touches, and everything she touches changes. She changes everything she touches, and everything she touches changes. Have you ever wanted to do something, needed to do something so deeply, and all the people around you told you that you shouldn't do it? Or even worse, you couldn't do it. I've had it happen to me. But Faye Fuller, Faye, she had a burning desire. And people were telling her, oh, you shouldn't, you couldn't do that. And yet, Faye said, I am going to climb Mount Rainier. Now, we might not think these days that that's anything terribly unusual. But Faye was born more than a century and a half ago. Faye was growing up, coming of age in the 1880s. And it was just not a thing that a young woman would do, to go climbing up a mountain when she should be sitting at home in the parlor, serving tea. Oh, but Faye was not to be deterred. Every piece of resistance only strengthened her. So, you know, she had grown up as a young woman up around near Tacoma, there in the late 1800s, when it was still a wilderness, when it was still tall, deep woods, towering trees, heavy underbrush. No I-5, no Olympia as we know it like this. No, it was a different world then. And Faye loved the wilderness. She cared about it. She thrived in it. She wanted to be out in it and be part of it. It was there in her 18th year that she actually had an opportunity to go and climb some part of Mount Rainier. But do you know, she was only allowed to climb as high as Paradise Camp and then was sent back. You know, it just was not appropriate. Paradise Camp in the 1880s was a camp. Paradise Lodge wasn't built until 1917. And we are talking decades before. But being turned back, only making it that far, only
stiffened. Faye's resolve. She would climb the mountain. Now you see, at age 18, Faye was a school teacher. She had graduated from high school, and if you had a high school degree, you could be a teacher. And so she taught up in the Kitsap Peninsula, she taught outside of Tacoma, and she taught down in Yelm. Oh, now how lucky it was for her. There she was, this young woman living right there in the shadow of the mountain, oh, so near, teaching these students who lived right there in the wilderness also. And just by chance, or was it by her astute planning, one of her students was the son of Philemon von Trump, not to be confused with the 21st century Trump, no relation. Philemon von Trump, who had climbed the mountain with another man back in 1870, the first known people to summit Mount Rainier. And he had subsequently led many other parties up the mountain. Oh, a student in her class. You know how it is when you can make acquaintances with the parents in your class, when you have a connection. And brilliantly, young Faye, she invited Mr. Von Trump to come and speak to her class about his expeditions, his adventures, his times up on the mountain. And a bond was formed. Mr. Von Trump must have had a bit of regard, a bit of curiosity about this young woman who was adventuresome and leading and had so many questions to ask him about his experiences. So by the end of that year, he invited Faye Fuller, the teacher, to come along with him and his family up to Paradise Camp. Well, we're getting a step closer. Up to Paradise Camp. Now, I know some friends here who love to go up to Paradise, who love to hike on Mount Rainier. I actually spent my honeymoon there at Paradise. We drove right up to that lodge. But that was in 1988. 1988. This was in 1890. And to get to Paradise from Yelm was an arduous 3-day horseback journey through the wilderness. The Von Trump family, along with Faye Fuller, made their way through the wilderness. They slept in farmers' barns for 2 nights, one and then the next, and their journey through their woods, through the deepness. And then they made it to Longmire Springs, where there was just a bit of what they said was called a resort. Maybe not by today's standards, any resort, but Longmire. And while she was there, she met a group of 4 men led by Reverend Edward Smith. Oh, I'm sorry, it was Ernest Smith, not Edward. Reverend Ernest Smith, and they were preparing to climb the mountain, to ascend and make the summit. Now, I'm not quite sure how she enamored herself with the group. I think it was all well chaperoned and appropriate. And they made their way, all of them, to Paradise Camp. And when they arrived there, they asked Faye, did she want to join in their party? And Von Trump, Mr. Von Trump, considered it, contemplated it, took responsibility for it, and said, I give you my permission. I'm not sure she asked for his permission, but still, it was given. Now, I want you to know, if you've already imagined it, that she has spent 3 days going through an arduous horseback journey through the wilderness. Have any of you ever bushwhacked through thick underbrush, through tall standing timber? It is not easy. It is hard work, and it takes a lot of preparation. It takes more than Polar Fleece and Healy Hansen to get there. So Faye had come prepared. She had had special clothing made for her so that she could be prepared to summit the mountain. She knew this was going to be the time. This would be the chance. This is when she was going to do it. And so, on the morning of August 10th, Faye pulled on her heavy woolen hose. Okay, you know, back in the day, women's hose weren't knee socks. They were like hose, heavy woolen hose. Her very, very comfortable flannel underwear, her woolen bloomer suit, and a specially made heavy woolen dress coat that came down to her ankles, but was split there in the front so that she could stride as she needed to climb. Now on her feet, because there wasn't a lot of gear for women's size shoes that were other than little heels and button top up the side, she wore a pair of boys' calfskin boots. And she even had to take nails, little tacking nails, cobbler's nails, and hammered them through the inside of the shoe, the boot, down out through the sole. So they would have what you call caulks. Loggers call them caulks on their boots, so that it grips and can hold. So with their homemade little boys' caulk boots, her coat, her heavy woolen coat, her woolen bloomers, her hose, and her flannel underwear, and her straw hat, Faye was an appropriate young woman to go up the mountain. 6:30 in the morning, August 10th. The party all charcoaled up their faces, like football players do today to take off the reflection, like some climbers still do today, that you put something black there so that the sun doesn't blind you. And to keep the sun off your face, they charcoaled up. They put on goggles. And they began the ascent. It was not a good day.
It was not the perfect day to be climbing. It was heavy overcast. And you know, when Rainier has a whole heavy overcast on it, the winds can blow. And when you are out there exposed, you are fighting a climb that is 9,000 feet gain of elevation. Climbing up to the top. And everybody thought, she can't do it. She just can't do it. And Faye refused assistance. She refused to let any of those other people, any of the men in her group, assist her. She put that ice axe that was made from a crooked shovel handle there into that solid snow, into that ice, and she climbed and climbed. She wouldn't let anybody assist her and help take her back down, because then they wouldn't be able to make the summit. She was determined that she would do this. Beginning at 6:30 in the morning, climbing through treacherous conditions, they made it to the crest summit at 4:30 in the afternoon. She said the sight was heaven, and nothing that could be explained unless you had been a person who had gone through that sort of strenuous ordeal to accomplish such a vision. 4:30 in the afternoon. It was too late to start the descent. And so it was that that party, which probably wasn't much of a party, they had to hunker down there, up on the top of the mountain, in an ice cave that had been formed by vented hot air, someplace that they could get in and get sheltered and maybe get a little warmer. Except there was a terrible sulfuric smell, and they endured it through the night. And they all suffered from altitude sickness for climbing so fast, so far, under such strenuous conditions, and with such primitive gear, we would say. They stayed the night. I don't know how much they slept. When I'm cold camping out, I am not able to sleep very much. It must have been an uncomfortable, smelly, wearisome night. And at 6:30 the next morning, they began the descent. Now, have you ever noticed that when you're hiking, sometimes, going up is hard. Going up takes work and strenuous effort, but going down, can bust up your knees, can jam your toes, can fall even sometimes more easily going downhill than going uphill. Stuff can slide underneath your foot, the shale, the ice. Things can roll down from above on you. And the weather conditions were no better than they had been the day before. The crew climbed down, and by 4:30 that afternoon, safely, they had all made it back down there to the camp at Paradise. They spent 5 days recovering there before they could leave again, from the wearisomeness in their bodies, from the windburn and sunburn on their faces, from their swollen lips. She said it was such pain that she hadn't known before. Intense. And after that 5 days of resting, recuperation, they went back on that same long 3-day horseback journey through the wilderness again. This was coming into late August by this point, and Faye was ready to start the school year there in Yelm. However, the school board, will say, the powers that be, decided that Faye was not a proper person to be teaching the children there because of her immodest, immoral behavior, sleeping overnight unchaperoned with 4 men. She was in bloomers, in flannel underwear. She was fired from her job as the young teacher. But Faye, did that keep Faye down? No. No. You see, her father happened to be the publisher of the newspaper in Tacoma. And so he gave his daughter the job of writing about the mountain and the happenings up in the mountain and out there in nature and the social events that were occurring as people were discovering this area, this wilderness, this beauty. And she wrote a regular column called Mountain Murmurs. She also became the founder for the Washington Alpine Club and that famous Oregon Mazamas Club. Faye went on to climb the mountain many, many times and encourage other people to love the mountain, to be on the mountain, to care about what was happening on the mountain. Now, you know, they say, well-behaved women rarely make history. But Faye did make history, and she opened it up for so many others to follow that trail right along. Faye Fuller. She changes everything she touches, and everything she touches changes. Welcome, my friends, back up. She touches everything she changes, and oops, everything she touches changes. She changes everything she touches, and everything she touches changes. She changes everything she touches, and everything she touches changes. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Women of wisdom, wonder, and wit. I think it described the characters and described our tellers. Thank you for that wonderful hour. Back. All right. Very good. But anyway, we're going to take a short break. Let's come back at 7:15. I have 7:08 on my clock now, so 7:15, and then we'll start with the story swap. So, thank you.
Membership feel bad. She says no, I'd lose it. She mailed it.
Oh, that's fine.
I bet Ann is, yeah.
I follow Ann because I think that's what she's doing.
Yeah.
Be careful.
Number two.
Okay.
What a lady.
There's a part, if I ever tell this again and expand it more in another story. The very first hike I went on with Dale, there weren't any good boots for women. This is in 87,
Yeah.
88, I mean, 79, 78, 79. And I was wearing a pair of Dexter little fake,
Oh,
you know,
geez, yeah.
classic, little hiking boots. They called them hiking boots. And we were coming down from this long hike, and my toes were bumping in, and I ended up in tears on the way down.
Wow,
Just
that's
cried.
so.
Yep. And so I could feel it when I'm going, this is what it's like when you're going downhill. This is how it's funny. I thought about you when I was talking about people climbing the mountain or loving Mount Rainier.
I never made it to the top. It's amazing that they hike from Paradise to the peak in one day. Because this is guided groups these days stop at Camp Muir. That's pretty impressive. I made it as far as Camp Muir. The altitude got me. But I was lucky, because I knew I wasn't going up the next morning. I stayed up really late laying on there's like a picnic table, laying on the table as a clear sky. And a meteor came over, broke into pieces, glowing green. Sure. I've seen 2 of those in my life. That was worth staying up late.
Pretty cool, yeah. And being laying on your back to see it.
Yeah, it was perfect.
I love it.
And then it took them the same amount of time coming down.
You did.
It took them to get up.
Yeah.
That's kind of
Places,
amazing.
everyone. It's time to start again.
Okay.
Welcome back. So I'm going to begin with a few announcements. And we want to thank our 3 tellers again. Those were wonderful and delightful stories and set the pace for a good evening. So before we start, I get to do the shameless commercial that others are so famous for here. The South Sound Story Guild, our events and activities are free to people, but at the same time, we do have expenses that we need to meet. So if you're so inclined, please donate. And you can donate by going to our website, which is southsoundstory.org, and you'll find one of the tabs that talks about donations and membership. And while I mentioned the word membership, this is also membership renewal month. So it'd be an opportunity also to join the guild. It's $25 to join as a family or $15 to join as an individual. So that closes the financial portion of today's festivities. So the other thing is our story swaps, as many of you know, are on the second Tuesdays, and we do have special events throughout the year, and we have Telebration coming up, and that will be in November. So check the website for the dates and the details. It's here in Olympia. It's at Traditions Cafe, which is just down the way here in downtown Olympia. So that's next up for our big event, and it's a really neat event to attend there. Okay, I think that's everything we have.
And then next month, in October, we have our next monthly meeting.
Which
Were
is,
you gonna mention that?
I wasn't, that was part of the second Tuesday, but
Okay,
please.
that's right.
But it'll be our second Tuesday. Our meeting will be on, I had written it down, the 13th, is it the 11th or the 13th?
Yeah.
But anyway, it's the second Tuesday of October, and we'll be here for
Wednesday.
that. Wednesday.
Yeah.
Good thing I have coaches here to help me. So, second Wednesday. Alrighty, so next up is our story swap, and leading off tonight is going to be Maggie. Maggie is going to stick to her roots and tell us a Southern story taken from our Southern traditions.
Thank you for all being here tonight. It's so fun to get to share a story. It's funny that this story, I think, will kind of dovetail into your story, Rebecca. But this one comes from a totally different place. I got this story, folktale, from a book called When Birds Could Talk and Bats Could Sing by Virginia Hamilton. And the book is all African American folk tales. And but they were originally published in the 1880s by a journalist by the name of Martha Young. And she heard the stories by the enslaved peoples on her father's plantation in Alabama. And so this story is called Little Brown Wren. Little Brown Wren lived in the meadow. She made her nest in the tall grass at the ends where the fences met. It was one fine day, and she and her friend Winter Wren were hopping about deep in the brambles. Brown Wren looked up into that way high sky up there, and she said, "There it is." And Winter Wren, hunting and pecking on the ground, too busy to look up, said, "There what is?" "Look, the sky, and all the high flyers are on the wing." "Well, maybe so, but I have work to do." And Winter Wren went hopping about, searching for her feed and grain. But Brown Wren was busy herself, seeing it all up there, all the birds on the wing. She was so excited watching them. There was Brother Eagle soaring round and round, way up there, almost to the sun's eye. And Brother Buzzard was up there, so free winging, looked like he's sailing amongst the clouds. Field Lark was over in the meadow, and she started twirling her wings up and up and up. She looked like a pinwheel. Up she flew. All the tree birds, blue jay, mockingbird, dove, bluebird, all of them were all a-winging and a-fluttering and a-flapping and a-chattering, and they were all flying, and then they all settled down in the apple tree. Well, Brown Wren, she looked at them all, and she wished she could fly up there. She called out to Winter Wren, "Winter Wren, let's you and I try to touch that great big sky. Let's just try it." Well, now, little wrens, all the wrens, they don't fly high. They don't go higher than a tall woman's shoulder. All the birds in the apple tree were shocked to hear her talk so. Winter Wren came fluttering over, and she said, "Hush that noise, Brown Wren. Everybody's gonna laugh at you." Well, Brown Wren, she was too excited to contain herself. She said, "I want to fly up in the sky. I want to see the world from on high." Well, all the birds in the tree had something to say. Blue Jay screeched down at her, "Big talk, big talk. You think you got the same size of wings as Brother Buzzard?" And Mockingbird called to her and said, "You're getting too big for your britches, little missy. You can't fly this high." They all were chattering and screaming at her. All the bird sounds rose up in the air, and Brother Buzzard heard, and he circled low, and he called out, "Ha, ha, no law against trying this way high flying. Never seen a wren up here, though. Don't think I'll see one today." And Field Lark dropped down into the ground in amazement at Wren's boasting. And she said, "Pride will fill you full. Boast will knock you over. You try to fly as high as I am, I'll know you've lost your mind." All the birds had something to say. Dove cooed, "Are you sure you could? Are you sure you should?" And Mother Sparrow, sitting on her nest, Mother Sparrow was worried about Brown Wren, and she said, "Sister Wren, it's too high for you to fly. You'll get hurt. You'll be sorry." But all the little baby sparrows, they laughed and teased Brown Wren. They said, "Go on, try it, fly it." And they laughed and laughed at her. All the birds had something to say to her. And Brown Wren, she was confused and upset. And then she thought it over, and she remembered something her mother had told her. She remembered her mother had said, honey, folks are going to tell you what they think you ought to do. Well, you just decide what it is you want to do, and you do it. But when they talk to you, you just listen, nod your head, no use to argue. But then you do what it is you want to do. Well, Brown Wren thought it over, and there wasn't anything more she wanted to do than fly high and see the world. And so she determined that she would do it. Now little wrens just do a little hop, skip, and a jump around normally, so she knew she was going to have to skip the hop and start in on the jump. And she did it too. She jumped up as high as she could, and just then there came this flash of fast wind underneath her, and it lifted her up over the apple tree. She had never flown that high before. And then that wind kept lifting her, and she put her eye on that great big sky up there, and she flapped her wings as hard as she could, and she flew up and up and up, all the way to Brother Buzzard's range, all the way up to Brother Eagle's way. And she flew, and she looked down, and she saw over the hill she had never seen over there before. And there was this golden valley and this glistening river and mountains and more mountains beyond that. What a wondrous sight. Oh, it was so beautiful. But then she looked down and she saw Brother Eagle flying around below her. And that's when she became afraid for the very first time. And then all of a sudden, that wind that had come from nowhere scooted out from under her, and she began to drop. Well, Brother Eagle came and gave her a soft hold with his wings to steady her, but still she kept falling. And Brother Buzzard was there with a quick grab flick, but still she fell. Lark was there giving her a grab hold flick to help her out. And then all the tree birds were there, and they were all grabbing and holding and flicking to hold her up, and she was all ruffled and tuffled, and finally she tumbled down to the ground. She went to her fence corner to take a rest. All the tree birds, they all were yelling at her. Blue Jay screeched, "You were born down there, get used to it." And Redbird yelled, "That's where you belong, now stay put." She twittered about and ruffled her feathers, and then she smoothed her feathers. But she had done it. She had flown high and seen the world, and she always remembered it. And she would tell her children about it, that time she flew so high. And she told them what her mother had told her. She would say, "Children, folks are going to tell you what they think you ought to do. Just listen, smile, nod your head, no use to argue. But then you decide what it is you want to do, and you go on and you do it." And Brown Wren, she always remembered that time she flew so high and saw the world from way up high in the sky. Yay! I just want to add that I tell this story tonight in honor of my mother. My mother is Betty Allen Smith Lott, and I tell this story in her honor because it was my mother's words that were the little brown wren's mother's words. I shifted the story around because one time relatives were telling me what to do, and my mother told me those words, and I never forgot it. And I said, "Oh, that's how she manages it." And I also tell it in honor of my mother because next week I will flying back home to Alabama to be with my mother for her 95th birthday. So, happy birthday, Mom! Thank you very much. Okay.
So Maggie, you decide what you want to do and you go on to do it. Yeah, yeah. Well, another decision was made tonight. John is going to join us, and even though appearances are quite deceptive, he's going to tell us about his 6.5-year-old self. So imagine this gentleman is 6.5. Yeah.
Thank you, Jay. Great to see all these smiles. You know, there's two reasons I come here. One is to see the smiles. The other is to act like a 6.5-year-old boy. And I know you all want to act like that once in a while. It was 1953. We were sitting at our dinner table. There was my mom, my dad, my sister, Blister, and my brother, Lugnut. Oh, and me. We were having spaghetti. Remember that spaghetti? Chief Boyardee came in a box. Had the noodles, had the ketchup in a can, and some little stinky stuff that you sprinkled on top. My mom put it all in the water, it boiled, she put it on her plate. I loved it. Then we'd stick it up and it'd slap us in the face, and she always put a sheet around me because I got it everywhere. Well, we're eating away. Honey, my mother always called me honey. She called my dad Bert. She called my brother Wayne. She called my sister Carla. But she called me honey because I was the smallest and probably the cutest. Yeah, tonight's a big night for you. Oh boy, are we gonna have lemon pie with white stuff on top? No, we're not having lemon meringue pie. Tonight you get to wash dishes for the first time. Oh no, Mom, no! My Blister yells out. Let him sweep the floor. Take the dustpan to the garbage dump. That'll take care of him for a while. My brother yells, Mom, please. I am supposed to help Willie fix his motorcycle. If John washes dishes, the snow will come. And it's July. Please. My dad spoke up in this low voice and calm. Okay, you two, that's enough. You both had your turn. You both had to be first once. Let Johnny do it tonight. Okay. My sister got up and got a square bucket, put it in the sink and put some water in it with a little bit of soap. Then she got another square bucket, put it on the other part of the sink and put clear water in there. I got a chair and climbed up on top. Put my hands in there, boy, it was hot. I don't know how I'm gonna wash it, but John, just take the dishcloth and start washing. Well, I start washing. And those bubbles are all over. And I'm washing, and I put it in the other bucket. Stop, John, stop doing that. Plates are not battleships. Forks are not airplanes. You wash the dishes. Okay. Can't we have a little fun once in a while? Wash, or I'm telling Mom. I went back to washing. I was washing a long time. The backs of my legs were hurting. My neck was hurting, back was hurting. I've been here a long time. Hey, you two knuckleheads, what are you doing? That was my dad. I'm washing dishes, Dad, and you're doing a fine job too, son. I'm talking about those other two knuckleheads. What'd they do, Dad? Something bad? They do something bad, Dad? You talk to your sister, ask her. Hey, Blister, what did you do? Were you bad? My sister and my brother were holding on to the counter, the sink, and laughing and pointing at me and just laughing at me. Blister, what did you do? Blister, what did you do? Quit laughing for me. Don't get mad. It happens to all of us. Every time you washed a plate and put it in the rinse water, I picked it up and pretended right, and I walked around back you and put it back in the pot. You've washed some of those dishes 10, 20 times. Oh, they laugh so hard. Well, I was crying. I hate you guys. I hate you. I jumped off, ran in bed, my bed, pulled the covers back and jumped in with my clothes on. And just dark in there. Thought, I got to do something. I hate them. They hate me. Just then, Mike, he was our little Cocker Spaniel, jumped up on my bed. I pulled the covers back and let him in. Mike, don't you have a bottom burp or you got to get out of bed. We sat there, we talked, Mike, and we had it figured out what to do the next morning. I heard footsteps. Mike, don't say a word. Honey, it's okay. Your sister and brother didn't mean to hurt you. They are just having fun. Come on in. I didn't say a word. We all love you. I didn't say a word. She left. The next morning I got up, got out of bed, had my clothes all, so I was ready to go. Pulled the box from underneath my bed, put my pair of pants up there, put a t-shirt up there, put the socks up there. Then I looked at my underpants. Now I remember my mom saying, always have a clean pair of underpants on because you don't know. Well, I didn't know, so I grabbed a whole bunch, put it up there. Then I picked them all up, walked into the kitchen, put them on the table. I went to the bread drawer because I was going to need some bread. I got a piece of bread and put it on there. Then I went in the fridge, got a piece of lettuce. In case that bread got stale, you could put the lettuce on, like my mom did. Then I got under the sink, and there was the bags you got from the grocery store. So I got one out, a big brown one, put everything in there. We called it Juno Samsonite. And I got up to put it on my arm, and I walked out the back door, and I was running away for good. I was all done with his family. Nobody loved me. I didn't love them. I went by this tree. Now our house was the third highest house in Juneau. It was on the side of Mount Roberts, and the Mount Roberts Trail ran right behind our house. And there was this tree, and my sister Blister said the first time I ran away, I was a little boy then, pretty small, I don't remember. But she said I went and hid behind that tree for 5 minutes and I came back home. That's as far as I got of running away. This time I was running away for good. I walked up the trail and started walking up. I was going to go up to the first picnic ground, and that wasn't very far from our house. Hey, little bear, stay away. You can eat me another day. That was a song my sister and I made, and we'd sing it as we walked through the woods to scare the bears away, because they were always there. And you know the song worked. Neither one of us had gotten eaten yet. I'd never seen anybody eaten by a bear. But I got up to the first picnic ground, laid all my clothes out, put my underpants in the middle because it was a big pile, sat down. I was hungry now. I ate my bread. I didn't know what to do with the lettuce, so I buried the lettuce. And maybe it'd be big lettuce when I got back up next time I ran away. This was boring. I had to go. I went, packed everything up, headed back down the trail. I came to 6th Street. Now 6th Street went down Star Hill. So I walked down Star Hill, got to Kennedy Street, walked over Kennedy and looked down in the chicken yard. Now the chicken yard was a big playground. And the sisters from St. Anne's Hospital used to raise chickens there. But they ate all the chickens, so they didn't need the yard anymore, so they gave it to those kids. That was pretty nice of the sisters. I saw a couple of them playing down there. I saw my cousin, Hambone. I waved at Hambone. Hey, Johnny. I turned around, it was Mrs. Cook. Where are you going? I'm running away. What do you got in your bag? I got all my clothes and a whole bunch of underpants. Well, that's nice. You have a nice time. Well, that lady was kind of stupid, wasn't she? She wasn't very nice. I turned back. Hey, Johnny, where are you going? Looked around to Mrs. Hubert. Now, Mrs. Hubert was a very good Catholic. That's what they said, because she had 10 kids. So I guess if you're a bad Catholic, you only have one kid. I guess that's how it works, but I'm not sure. What are you doing? I'm gonna run away. Where are you going? I can't tell you because you'll tell Blister and Lugnet. Well, I hope you don't go far. What about your mother? Won't your mother get lonesome? Yeah, she might. I think you better think about that. You have a good trip if you go somewhere. Thank you, Mrs. Shepard. She was a nice lady. I sat there just thinking, I gotta get home and see my mother. So I hustled as fast as I could with that Juno Sampson. I got to the bottom of our house. I ran up to our stairs, went through the back door. Oh my goodness, there was nobody in our house. They were all out looking for me. I walked into the living room. There was my mom, Irene. Hi, Annie. Wayne and Carter are already been up, dressed, had breakfast, and out playing. You want to go play? I looked at my mom. I couldn't tell her. I could not tell her because I knew her heart would fall out and fall on the ironing board and then onto the floor and break. I couldn't let that happen. But I was happy because now my mom had somebody to do the dishes tonight. Thank you.
The Adventures of a 6-Year-Old. Lugnut, what a great nickname. But yeah, thanks for your story, John. And I don't know if John mentioned it or not, but he comes to us from Squim. He drove up to share his story with us, and thank you for doing that. Alrighty, next up, we've had some good stories, and all of them seem to have this theme of the wisdom of women in it. We started out that way, and we had a story that honored Maggie's mother. We appreciate that. John, your mom was pretty prominent in your story. And we're going to shift gears just a little bit, I think, when Brett comes up and talks to us about the wise fool. Let's see what his wisdom is. Is it the light?
I think so, yeah. Try turning the lights on. Ta-da! Okay. Am I okay? Can you see all of my beautiful? Okay. I'm going to tell you a story that comes to us from a long tradition of Mullah Nasruddin, who was a real person who lived in Turkey about 1100 AD. And Mullah Nasruddin was an Islamic scholar, and we don't know whether the stories about him are real or not, but they're used by Islamic people all over the world to teach morals, ethics to the young people because they're very relatable. So Mullah Nasruddin lived in his village, and everybody recognized that he had a lot of wisdom, a lot of common sense. So they'd come and they would ask him, Mullah, should my daughter marry this guy or not? Or should I invest in that plot of land? Or should I buy a camel? And they were bombarding him all the time with these questions, and he was getting tired of it. In fact, one night he was sleeping on the roof with his family, as people do in that part of the world when it's really hot. They're all up there having a good rest and enjoying the stars. And all of a sudden, a stone flies up and lands on the roof. And then another one. And then another one. So Mullah Nasruddin looks over the edge of the roof and he sees a man down in the street saying, Mullah, I have a question. And Mullah gets a little annoyed at this. He says, hey, it's nighttime. I'm sleeping. Go away. Stop asking me your questions. And he says, no. This is a really important question. It's worth a lot of money, and it's an important business deal, and it's about ethics. Well, all right, tell me what the problem is, and as I walk downstairs to come out and meet you and maybe punch you in the nose, I will think of the answer to your question. So the man in the street says, I have a mule to sell and I have a buyer. Now, my question is, should I tell this buyer that my mule is actually ill and probably won't live more than 2 or 3 months? And Mullen Nasruddin says, I don't have to come downstairs to answer that question. Of course you must tell him. You must tell him the truth and you must be honest. Now go away. So the next day, Nasruddin has had it with all of this, and he puts a sign up on his door. 3 questions answered for 100 dinars. And right away, the questions cease. So he's sitting back, and for a few days, he's enjoying his peace and quiet, when one evening there's a knock on the door. And the mullah opens the door, and standing there is a well-dressed businessman. And mullah says, what can I do to help you? And the businessman looks at the sign and he says, is this true? You know, that you would answer 3 questions for 100 dinars? Don't you think 100 dinars is a bit much? And Mullah Nasruddin says, yes. And what is your second question? The businessman says, oh, now wait a minute. That wasn't my first question. That wasn't my first question at all. Do you think it's fair to do that? And Mullah Nasruddin says, yes. And what is your third question? Says, okay. Fortunately, I'm wealthy. I can afford the 100 dinars. So here's the money. Now here's the question. I moved here from Damascus, and I love roses. I really love roses dearly. So I've planted roses all around my house. But the problem is they don't grow. All I get is dandelions. These damn dandelions everywhere. Mullah Nasruddin says, oh, that is a tough question. Well, have you tried the dung of an old camel mixed in the soil? And the businessman says, oh, yes, I've tried that. Didn't work at all. He says, well, have you tried putting sour milk at night under a full moon? And the businessman says, well, every gardener knows to do that. And Mullah Nasruddin says, okay, here's another thing you could do. You take bread and you break it up and you soak it in water and you plant it along with your rose bushes. And the businessman says, well, I'm sorry, Mullah, but I even tried that on the advice of my gardener. All I get are these damn yellow flowers. So Mullah Nasruddin says, well, obviously, I think that you need to learn to love dandelions. So that is a Nasruddin story. I can tell you another one. Do we have time? No?
We can do
One more quick one. This is a quick one. This one is about the people of Chelm. Chelm is a village somewhere in Eastern Europe that is populated by Jewish people and they have a number of people in the village who feel they are very wise about life. So one night, coming home from the synagogue, a man walks by the rain barrel and he notices in the rain barrel is a moon, a beautiful, big, full, silvery moon. And he looks at that and he calls his friends over and they all look at it and there it is, a beautiful moon. And they say, well, quick, put a lid on the barrel so that it won't escape and we can keep it and that will add to the wealth of our village. So they find a lid and they nail it down and they all go home very satisfied that they have saved the village a lot of money. Well, as things go, the moon, the nights become darker and darker and darker as we get closer to a new moon. And so when it's completely dark, they're coming home from the synagogue, and one says to the other, wouldn't it be nice if we had some light? Let's go to the barrel and open it up and let that moon, that beautiful moon, come out and light our way home. So they go over and they take the lid off, and it's gone. There's nothing there. So they're astounded at this, and they're really angry. Who would have stolen our moon? Who would do that? So we will hire a private detective. Now they would call the word is shamas it's not Hebrew. It's what's the word? Yiddish. It's Yiddish. So they hire a shamas, and he comes and he searches the buildings, and he searches the barns. He even searches under people's bed, but they can't find the moon, and they never found out who stole it. Thank you.
So thanks. So next up is Toby, and she'll be our final teller, and it's a story of kindness.
Thank you. This is a story from China. Up in the heavens, the Jade Emperor was quite disgusted with humankind. Now his wise advisoress, a very, very wise woman, came to him and said, "Sire, why don't you throw a party? Now, as we look down on Earth, sire, there are 2 villages. Throw them a party, and let's see what happens." I like that idea. So they go to the first village. Now, this is a village, many, many people, but it's got the kind of people that would do something like this. The harvest of garlic was just absolutely enormous. But the farmer didn't dare put any of the garlic out to share. No, 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 no. These are for me and my family only. A person that had this immense library could have easily lent the books to the other people. Oh, no, I don't want grease stains on these pages. Now, the village was going to have a very big wedding, and the family was preparing, and they had this big invitation list. No, 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 no. Started scratching people up. Don't like them, not nice. That was the attitude of this village. But the Jade Emperor remembered he was to throw them a party. How, boo, how, good or not, I need to do that. The whole village was invited to this incredible feast of chashu pao, steamed dumplings, fried noodles. The whole tables were filled with food. Everyone came in and they sat. Oh, the aroma was absolutely fantastic. And when they picked up their chopsticks, hey, what is this? These chopsticks are this long, 3 feet long. And they start grabbing at the food, but can't reach the food. What is it? The whole table was like that. And they threw down their chopsticks in disgust. Jade Emperor, you play us to be a fool. Ha! And they left the feast. And what happened to the food? Oh, it just rotted. Now there was that other village that a Jade Emperor promised them a party too. Now this village though, the farmer who had garlic, he would have a big bin of garlic for the whole village to take. The person who had all these library books, my goodness, I have 2 copies of this book. It's free. And then the wedding that was going to happen to this very, very prestigious family. Oh, you know what? We didn't invite Maggie Lott and her family. Let's put her down on this list. They invited everybody in the village to celebrate. So the party was ready, and again, beautiful feast with steamed dumplings, fried noodles, little baby pork spare ribs. Oh, so delicate. And the villagers came, and they sat down, and they all picked up these hats.
3 feet long chopsticks. Now, how are they going to eat with those contraptions? Until one of them noticed, are you looking for the bok choy? Here, I'll feed you. And the other, you looking for the spare ribs? Here. And fed the neighbor. This went on. There was nothing left on the table. Everyone was so full. Everyone went back happy. They looked up at the heavens. Thank you, Jade Emperor. Ho sek, which means delicious in Cantonese. Oh, and they left. Now the Jade Emperor then looked down at the 2 villagers. You know, though, I must say, I'm a bit disappointed. However, my feeling of humankind has been restored. There are good people down there on earth.
Well, thanks, Toby. Good way to end the story. There are lots of good people here, and a lot of them are right here and up out there in Zoom land. So thank you for coming today. A couple of quick reminders. October 11th is the next meeting for the South Sound Story Guild, and it'll be right here. And then our celebration is at the Traditions Cafe on November 24th. And I'll revert again to being shameless. Pay your dues, and if you'd like to donate, please do so. Thank you, and good night.
You got it.
Thanks, Brett.
Okay.
I was just gonna ask you where you
Which table?